Welcome to Gold TV with your host David Gold. Today we are looking at Genesis chapter 20, a story of King Abimelech, Abraham, and the beautiful wife Sarah. So after the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, the man called Mr. Abraham decides to relocate to a place called Gerar. And here is the jurisdiction of King Abimelech. It is amazing that even at 50s, 60s, Sarah was a ravishing beauty and she catches the eye of the king of Gerar. And the man is interested in this woman, but this woman is married. The problem is one, Abraham has got his own fears. He thinks that this place is a God-forsaken place which has no fear of God. Decides to tell Sarah to make a deal with him that whoever inquires about her, the same needs to know that she's just the sister, that Abraham is the brother. The king comes and grabs the woman because the word on the ground between the brother and the sister is that they are just relatives. Abimelech takes Sarah to his harem of many wives because those days kings had the freedom to marry as many women as they so desired. But in the dead of the night, God appears to King Abimelech in a dream and tells him that you're a dead man unless you return that woman to the husband. So the king is stunned because all of a sudden he realizes that Abraham and Sarah lied to him, and so he argues before God, God, I only did this in my own innocence and in integrity of my heart. Did I take this woman? And God says, yes, I understand that you are innocent in this matter and that you are not malicious in the fact that you grabbed another man's wife. And indeed, I did two things. One, I kept you from sinning with her, and two, I even kept you from touching her. Part number one of this lesson, before we go to the other lessons that are deeper and beyond this, I will just concentrate on those two lessons. Number one, God is able to keep you from sinning sexually. God is able to keep you from adultery. God is able to keep you from infidelity, fornication, masturbation, and porn. God is able to keep you from any sexual sin imaginable. The word that God uses to say so is that I kept you from sinning against me. Now realize that it was not sinning against Abraham or sinning against Sarah. God is able to keep us from sinning against him. These are the same words that Joseph, who ran away from Potiphar's wife, used. How can I do this thing and sin against my God? When we sin against our bodies, we sin against God. When we sin sexually, we don't just sin against our bodies or even the people that we sleep around with, we sin against God. If it is God, we will always focus on sinning against them. It will always be easier to realize that all the other excuses that cause men to sin are irrelevant. The most important person to respect insofar as keeping or fighting for purity is concerned is the Lord himself. It is the honor of God that we uphold when we refuse to sin. When we say no to sin, is the honor of God that we uphold. And God himself is able to keep us from sinning against him. These are words repeated even in the New Testament in Jude verse 24, that is able to keep us from falling. The God that is able to keep us from sinning against him is the same God that is able to keep us from falling. And this is great encouragement. And also is a point of prayer. Lord, keep me from sinning against you. Lord, keep me from falling into fornication, into adultery, into masturbation, into porn, into sodomy. Lord, keep me from sinning against you. And number two, of which is usually a temptation for many men, God tells Abimelech that I kept you from touching that woman. This is beautiful. You have heard of the song that sometimes back, I think in the 90s, that was called Tempted to Touch. There is this debate about men being visual and they want and they don't mind touching women. It's a sensual exploration game. It is making out. You want to touch her face, her boobs, her bums. You want to touch a woman everywhere. But it is the touch that later graduates into full sex. So until you have learned to keep boundaries, then you will sin sexually. So what God is telling us here is that I am able to keep you within your boundaries. God is able to keep a man within the boundaries of not sinning against him. As long as I don't touch that woman, as long as I don't flirt with that woman, as long as I don't invite her into my bed, as long as I don't remove her clothes, then I will not sin against God. I will not sin against myself. I will not sin against my body. If God is able to keep us in our boundaries, if God is able to make us keep our boundaries, then the Lord is able to keep us from falling into sin. And which is the question of the egg and the chicken comes. Which comes before the other? Is it sinning against God, or is it maintaining or keeping our boundaries? Whichever it is, what God is telling us is that whether it is the egg or chicken, God has got it all under control. And this is great encouragement to me. There are so many prayers we may pray, especially when we are struggling with sexual immorality. But I think this is one of the most effective prayers that we can pray, because God himself takes the honor of doing these two things. One, making you able to keep and stay within your boundaries. And number two, he is able to keep you from falling into any form of sexual sin by making sure you don't sin against him. And he takes the honor of saying that I kept you from sin. Let it be that it's not us necessarily who overcame, but it's the God of all power, God of all purity, God of all holiness, that is able to keep us from falling into sexual sin. And all the glory goes back to him, and all the honor will go back to him when we stand in glory, spotless and pure before him, having perfected fear in the holiness of God, and having been transformed into his image, and looking and sounding and behaving like one with him. For he who is joined to the Lord is one spirit with him. We shall appear in his likeness, in his holiness. It is him who gets all the glory. It is him that kept us from falling. It is him that kept us from sinning. It is him that kept us within our boundaries. God bless you. Spread the word, and let somebody out there who is struggling know that it's not so much about you fighting to keep pure, but it's about giving him glory, who is able to keep us from falling and to keep within our boundaries and to keep from sinning. God bless you. Now let's wait for number 2, which has got around 20 other lessons from the same chapter, and these were only 2 lessons, and I believe we shall be blessed. Spread the word, spread the love in Jesus' mighty name.